Coronavirus is a deadly coughing disease that hangs about in the air and is passed from person to person. You must always stay alert, and if you feel like you can sense coronavirus, get indoors, fast. If you're away from home, drop face first to the ground. In this position, the only cavity exposed is the anal duct, and that should not pose a problem so long as you're wearing trousers. When you're back inside, clean your hands with a strong disinfectant, and stockpile as many antibacterials and toilet rolls as you can. You'll be needing these. If you don't have an indoor toilet, cut a hole in your favorite chair and stick a bucket underneath. If you don't have chairs, dig a hole for yourself somewhere inside the house. During a coronavirus outbreak, anyone you see could be a carrier. This includes your teacher, your local policeman, even the nice couple you meet down the park. You'd think you'd always be safe with nice men like these who like to hang around children's playgrounds. This man looks nice.
I'll bet you can't catch me.
But look a bit closer. He's a carrier. You probably feel safe inside a car, but even a car can be a carrier. If you cough on a car, that car becomes a carrier, which is why scientists now sometimes refer to the coronavirus as the car owner virus.
Hello, young lady.
This girl doesn't know it, but if she gets into the car, she'll become a carrier.
No, thank you.
Janet, would you like to know why you shouldn't have gotten into that car? It could have put you in great danger.
You mean sort of like when Johnny hits me and pulls my hair when we have a row?
No, it could have given you a deadly virus.
You mean do something rude to me?
No, not like that either, but you should go home now before you cause any more trouble. Carriers come in all shapes and sizes, so it's important when you're out and about to note down anyone you see coughing or wheezing.
Hey, what are you doing? Taking that man's number. Who do you think you are, the Sweeney or something? Shut up, it might be serious.
When you return home, immediately call the police and notify them of any person you've seen who you think is or might be a carrier.
And, had brown eyes.
What sort of coat was he wearing?
I can't really remember because he was inside all the time.
I see.
It's actually unlikely that coronavirus will affect us for at least, I'd say, 50 years. And it's important to remember that the world will be very different in half a century's time. Nursing, for instance, will be almost unrecognizable. They certainly won't be muddling around with these old gadgets. We expect hospitals will look something like this. And our world leaders won't be human beings. They're more likely to look like this. Ultra-intelligent supercomputers, processing vast quantities of information faster than any human mind. So with these men in charge, coronavirus should be stopped in its tracks in no time. Are you ready, Hugo?
We're all set here, sir.
Na STB Bartolomějská vypoutánka.
Mais ça va vraiment jusqu'au bout.
Ouais, c'est à Clichy, ça.
Ouais.
Vous allez perdre toute vos libertés. Réveillez-vous. Réveillez-vous, venez.
Everybody keep moving! Keep moving!
Looking at history, history tells us that economic crises lead to security crises. How worried are you that the global economic crisis brought on by coronavirus could lead to new security threats, potentially even war?
Yes, I mean, I think, we're living at a moment in time where the world is a very uncertain and anxious place. And of course, the dynamic of global competition is a feature of our lives as well. And I think the real risk we have with quite a lot of the regional conflicts that are going on at the moment is you could see escalation lead to miscalculation. And that's the thing I think we have to guard against.
Miscalculation, can you just spell that out in easy language? What does that mean?
So what that means is that the protagonists, either because they don't realise the implications of their actions, lead to an escalation, which means that more people perhaps get involved, more weaponry gets involved, and before you can contain it, it leads to the sides ending up in a full-blown war. And if that happens, as we saw in the last century, I mean, we have to remember history might not repeat itself, but it has a rhythm. And if you look back at the last century, before both world wars, I think it was unarguable that there was escalation that led to the miscalculation, which ultimately led to war at a scale we would hopefully never see again.
So are you saying that's a real threat, that there could be another world war?
I'm saying it's a risk, and I think we need to be conscious of those risks.
South Australia is up in arms over a lie which led to the state's 6-day lockdown. Authorities say a COVID-19 patient had allegedly lied to contact tracers, saying he was infected after a quick visit to a pizza place. But it turned out he was working part-time at that restaurant and had contracted the virus from a colleague.
To say that I am fuming about the actions of this individual is an absolute understatement. The selfish actions of this individual have put our whole state in a very difficult situation. His actions have affected businesses, individuals, family groups, and is completely and utterly unacceptable.
The discovery has prompted authorities to lift the lockdown from tomorrow, 3 days earlier than planned. And that's because the coronavirus strain is not as highly contagious as originally believed. An investigation is underway. There are 25 cases linked to the new cluster, which emerged from a quarantine hotel in Adelaide.
Time now to talk through the stories making headlines today, and we're joined by Nick Ferrari and Bev Turner. Good morning to both of you. Lovely to see you both today. So we're going to be talking about the vaccine. We seem to be talking about this an awful lot at the moment, but this is in conjunction with this passport, this immunity passport that could mean bars, cinemas and football stadiums could turn away Brits who have not been vaccinated. They're saying that this is a way to kickstart travel again, that we can all go away. Bev, what do you think? Is this a good idea?
No, it's a terrible idea. I think if you want to get the vaccine because you are in the high-risk category, then of course you should just get the vaccine of your own free will. My fear is that it won't just end with coronavirus status. If we are asking everybody in this country to have a device, whether this is on your mobile phone or whether this is something that you literally carry, I doubt it will be. It will be some sort of technological reality for us. You will have to declare all sorts of things. This will not end with COVID. If they can get you to declare your status for a disease, which 99.7% of people will survive, then there will be others that you will also have to declare, whether that is your HIV status, whether that is your diabetes. This, for me, is just the tip of the iceberg. I don't like it at all.
And, Nick, the government allegedly... There's so much rubbish written about this stuff now, because you get to the point where you're not quite sure what anybody has actually said. The government has said vaccinations will not be compulsory in the UK, but immunity passports could mean bars, cinemas and football stadiums could turn away Britons who have not been vaccinated against coronavirus. Speaking this morning, Michael Gove said vaccine passports would not be required to visit the pub, and nor was he aware of any discussions taking place on such an idea. Is this just, again, one of those rumours that set fire and started burning?
No, it's actually on my show that Michael Gove said that. If we back up a little, this was as a result of Nadeem Zahawi, another Conservative minister who's effectively the vaccine minister. He floated the idea, and let's just stress, it was only suggested that maybe we would be in a position that if you wanted to go into a pub, if you wanted to go into a theatre, you would need to show possibly the same sort of app. It would be downloaded that you'd actually had the vaccine. When I put this to Michael Gove later today, or this morning, and I said, look, effectively, no jab, no entry, no. His argument is we need to do everything we possibly can to persuade the population. And Philip, you and I have spoken about, I think you and I are going to battle, aren't we, in the studio for as soon as that vaccine becomes available.
Oh,
and
I am absolutely without question. I mean, obviously, this is my other point, because, yes, I would quite happily put my hand up and I'd be first in line. I'm there. However, if listening to what Nadeem Zahawi said, there could possibly, this might be a thought. I just thought, hold on a second, because if we are going to quite rightly vaccinate the most vulnerable and then people above 80, and then people above 70, and then people above 60, and you gradually work your way through. So that means that in the scheme of things, if it comes to going to a bar or a restaurant, then people who are in their 20s, 30s and 40s, it'll be the summer before they could even go to the pub if we follow what he's suggesting.
And that's why that's why it's unworkable, in all honesty. And the reality is that I don't think any of us. Well, I hear what Beverly says. I think it's a little far-fetched that this will effectively be like a tracking system. I really can't subscribe to that. But the idea that it is made mandatory, compulsory, is wholly wrong. I don't think you'll find any government minister, not least there are people who are genuinely needle phobic, and there are people whose religious beliefs mean they do not allow themselves to have vaccinations. I don't want to live in a country where you can't go into a theatre or you can't go into a pub unless you have been forced to have a state shot. Having said that, I urge all of your viewers, as I urge my listeners, unless you have outriding health concerns, get this vaccination as soon as you can.
Well, listen, you don't need a vaccination to go to the pub and have a drink in Tier 2. According to Environment Secretary George Eustice, he says you need to have a Scotch egg, which is a...
George, what was he?
Eustace.
Oh, Eustace.
Eustace.
Okay, Eustace.
That constitutes a substantial meal, apparently. And the thing is, yes, it's quite funny talking about Scotch eggs in this way, but the problem is, for pub owners who this is a real reality for, they're accusing government of providing no clarity, actually, on what a substantial meal rule is.
Though, I mean, hold on a second, that is quite substantial. You know.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a sturdy thing, isn't it? But there is no kind of real rules here for them to turn to, really. No clarity. And that word clarity has been used a lot throughout this pandemic.
We come to Our Lady of Guadalupe on her feast day with troubled and heavy hearts. Our nation is going through a crisis which threatens its very future as free and democratic. The worldwide spread of Marxist materialism, which has already brought destruction and death to the lives of so many, and which has threatened the foundations of our nation for decades, and now seems to seize the governing power over our nation. To attain economic gains, we as a nation have permitted ourselves to become dependent upon the Chinese Communist Party, an ideology totally opposed to the Christian foundations upon which families and our nation remain safe and prosper. I speak of the United States of America, but evidently many other nations are in the throes of a similar, most alarming crisis. Then there is the mysterious Wuhan virus, about whose nature and prevention the mass media daily give us conflicting information. What is clear, however, is that it has been used by certain forces inimical to families and to the freedom of nations to advance their evil agenda. These forces tell us that we are now the subjects of the so-called Great Reset, the new normal.
Just simple words there, reacting it. You're quite emotional by that.
Well, it's just, it's been, you know, it's been such a tough year.
I don't think that's actual crying, is it? It's sort of laughing.
Well, it's just, it's been...
What I would say is it was definitely theatrical. Whether or not he's crying, I mean, he's evidently not crying if what you mean by crying is tears coming out of someone's eyes, because that's not what's happened. It's not often that a political figure emerges that we feel intuitively we can trust, that they're telling us the truth, that they're being honest. And the reason for that is because they're not. £18 billion in coronavirus-related contracts were awarded during the first 6 months of the pandemic, with £1.5 billion going to companies with connections to the Conservative Party. Companies with a government referral were 10 times more likely to end up winning a contract than those without. And check out this, this is a story you might be familiar with. An acquaintance and former neighbour of Matt Hancock is supplying the government with tens of millions of vials for NHS COVID-19 tests despite having no previous experience of producing medical supplies. Meanwhile, in the United States, a batch of contracts worth $194 million went to Health Supply US, a company founded 6 months ago by a former Trump administration official. Zach Fuentes, LLC, which is led by President Trump's former Deputy Chief of Staff, was awarded a $3 million federal contract to provide respirator masks, which subsequently couldn't be used. So, like, there's this performative element of politics going on the TV and sort of cry laughing. Then there's this reality of politics, contracts awarded, decisions made that are advantageous to friends, affiliates and associates. I suppose what this indicates is behind the theatre of conventional politics, business as usual is being conducted. In fact, it's business better than usual for the extremely wealthy. The coronavirus pandemic and corresponding lockdown has made way for one of the greatest wealth transfers in history. Billionaires increased their wealth by more than a quarter at the height of the crisis from March to June, just as 42 million Americans filed for jobless claims or struggled to get by on government schemes.
Where it began, I can't begin to knowing, but then I know it's growing strong. Was in the spring, and spring became the summer. Who'd have believed you'd come along? Washing hands, reaching out, don't touch me, I won't touch you. We're in quarantine, in our own corona homes. That's where you have to go to stay away from it all.
Not fear, but please stay here. Stay at home now, everyone. We must wash and clean things well. Cars, no long trips just for fun. Don't let COVID virus spread. Isolate yourself at home. See your friends online instead. That's the healthy way to go.
Is this a fever? Is this just allergies? Caught in a lockdown, no escape from the family. Don't touch your eyes, just hand sanitize quickly. No one told you life was gonna be this way. Your job's a joke, you broke, your love life's the old way. It's like you're always stuck in second gear. When it hasn't been your day, week, your month, even your year. They have quarantined, my daughter gave to me 3 dozen cupcakes, social distancing, hand sanitizer, fake news from Fox. Surging unemployment, 3 useless emails, no toilet paper, and the schools closed indefinitely.
It's Christmas time, with households mixing everywhere.
And at Christmas time, infections spike and we don't care. And in our 5-day window, you can spread your viral load.
So throw your arms around your man at Christmas time. A sausage roll for a shielding mate.
Yes, mate.
In a bag thrown over the gate. But for a smile we can share a bite and eat on and on and on and on. Breakfast, baking. I went to Greg's, now I'm isolating. I'm on lockdown tonight. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Lit up in blue, the colour of the NHS.
Thank you, NHS heroes.
Oh, I say, yeah, yeah, I got enough love for two. You'll never be alone, I'll be there for you.
Thank you all very much.
Happy New Year. Our planet is unique, a living world of diversity and wonder. It's also fragile. With a new year comes the opportunity for change, and if we act in 2021, we can make a world of difference. Together, we can turn things around. Together, we can restore our fragile home and make it a happy new year for all the inhabitants of planet Earth.
So here it is. Welcome to 2021. Happy New Year. Now, a lot of people are asking me, what next? What do you do next, Nigel, now that your life's work is done? Well, I'll tell you what the next big challenge is. And in some ways, it's an even bigger challenge than the European Union was. A bigger threat to our independence, our way of life, our liberty. And it is China. Those scenes last night, as police officers went around London to make sure nobody got over the fence to celebrate in Trafalgar Square, street parties in Wuhan. But China are doing their absolute best to take over the world. They're throttling democracy in Hong Kong, and they'll do their best to do it elsewhere. They've taken over many of the resources in Africa. This Chinese Communist Party pose a massive threat to the world, a threat to our freedoms, a threat to our way of life. So my next campaign is to make sure people understand who China are, what the Chinese Communist Party is, what it's doing to its own people, what it wants to do to the rest of the world. We need to wake up to the threat that is posed by China.
Well, let's bring you up to date now with the latest COVID data that we've just received in relation to COVID deaths. And we are seeing, I'm afraid to say, the highest number of daily deaths since the pandemic began.
We have now had the highest number of deaths, daily deaths, since the start of the pandemic, just to reiterate what you've been saying there. Within the last day, that 24 hours, there have been 1,325 deaths. That's deaths of people who've died within 28 days of a positive COVID-19 deaths. That's surpassed the highest number, which was on the 21st of April, which was 1,224. The epidemic is increasing. Regionally, there are some differences. It looks like the Southwest is seeing an estimated between 1.1 and 1.5 R number, which is higher than the UK average, and also the growth rate, which looks at how quickly the number of infections are changing day by day. Across the UK, it's between 0 and 6%. But if you take the example of the Southwest, it's between 2 and 8%.
Now, the UK is now the first country in Europe with over 100,000 deaths from coronavirus. Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he accepts responsibility as the public questions his government's handling of the crisis.
We truly did everything we could and continue to do everything that we can to minimise loss of life and to minimise suffering in what has been a very, very difficult stage and a very, very difficult crisis for our country.
David, does the government get credit for doing a good job with the vaccine rollout? I mean, I know every country's national media thinks that their government is doing the worst job, but the UK is unquestionably ahead of its European peers.
Well, that is certainly true, and it is the one bright spot in the government's record on this. There's a huge spat, of course, going on in the European Union with AstraZeneca about their deliveries, and their chief executive gave interviews yesterday where he pointed out that Britain was 3 months ahead of the European Union negotiating their contract, and that explains why they've got so much of the supply sorted out in advance. So yes, a bright spot. Mr. Johnson's been very keen to trumpet this over the last few weeks. To say again, he wasn't doing that last night. It wasn't really the time to do that. But now you can expect the government very much to pivot the focus away from the horrific death toll onto this very rapid progress on the vaccination. There is a question, of course, about the second dosages of this. Those very high numbers are people getting their first dose, remember that, and the full efficacy isn't there until the second doses come. But nevertheless, we are hoping, and the government are hoping, to see a change in both the very high hospitalisation and the death rates. And you can imagine the government are going to latch onto that and try to show that finally they are getting ahead of this pandemic, and notably ahead of the rest of many countries around the world.
A magnificent achievement for the country. That's how British Health Secretary Matt Hancock described the UK's vaccination effort on Twitter Sunday, after more than 20 million people across the UK received a COVID-19 vaccine. Britain has rolled out Europe's fastest COVID-19 vaccination program, raising the prospect of a lifting of its current lockdown restrictions between now and the end of June. The country also reported a further 6,035 cases within the previous 24 hours and 144 more deaths within 28 days of a positive test. The latest figures meant cases over the past 7 days were down 21.2% compared with the previous 7-day period, and deaths were down 33.5%. Officials advising the government said on Friday that certain occupations will not jump to the head of the queue in the second phase of Britain's COVID-19 vaccination rollout, with people instead prioritised by age.
Well, hey, it's me. I'm finally going to get my vaccine. I'm so excited. I've been waiting a while. I'm old enough to get it, and I'm smart enough to get it. So I'm very happy that I'm going to get my Moderna shot today. And I wanted to tell everybody, I think you should get out there and do it too. I even changed one of my songs to fit the occasion. It goes, vaccine, 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 vaccine. I'm begging of you, please don't hesitate. Vaccine, 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 vaccine. 'Cause once you're dead, then that's a bit too late. I know I'm trying to be funny now. All right.
These are kids recently back at school in Scotland. Meanwhile, this is somewhere in the US. It kind of brings out the Pink Floyd in you, doesn't it? What a time to be a kid. Ministers have been warned that face masks in class are causing physical harm to children. Side effects include breathing difficulties, headaches and dizziness. Surprise, surprise. That's why it's good to see things like this. Stockholm School sends pupil home for wearing a face mask. That's right, you heard that right. For wearing a face mask. A 13-year-old was banned from attending classes until he agreed to remove the mask he was wearing. They're the sort of principles we should be teaching our kids.
After a year of such darkness, tonight it was by the warm glow of candlelight that COVID's victims were remembered. A simple act of community to collectively grieve and hope the worst has passed. From the emptied offices of the City of London to the Blackpool Tower, buildings across the country were lit up in tribute, perhaps the first in a future tradition of COVID remembrances. This one began at noon with silence. Britain united with similar solemnity to Armistice Day for a crisis which has scarred this country more than anything since the war.